A pleasant day, everyone. We are the Contemporary Group, together with Rizala Balaza, Elizabeth Zaldivar, Nashiba Mala, Shekinah Lubiano, Kathleen Casares, and Kathleen Binion. Today we are going to talk about the Philippine literary in the contemporary period, along with its historical background, its prominent authors and writers, prominent literatures, and formalistic criticism approach towards a work in the contemporary period, namely Filipinas by Joel Lamangan. Contemporary period is a period that is also known as the birth of freedom. It is when the Filipinos regained its freedom and waved the Philippine flag joyously. When the Philippines regained its freedom, Filipinos has learned to express their feelings and thoughts confidently through literary works. Literature is a group of written works that started in the history up to this day. Philippine contemporary literature is composed of the native language of the Filipinos but also changed after the invasion of the Americans, following the end of the martial law. Filipino writers continue to produce short stories, novels, novellas, poetry, and essay. Stories had better characters and events based on facts and realities, and themes were more meaningful.
The historical background of the contemporary period of Philippine literature. The contemporary period of Philippine literature started in the 1960s, but it really took off once the martial law regime ended in 1986. The use of native languages rather than foreign languages as the primary means of literary expression describes this period. The horrendous martial law government of Ferdinand Marcos from 1972 to 1986 slowed the current drive toward the use of native languages in Filipino literature. Following the fall of the regime, the Philippines made a concerted attempt to resurrect its local language literary heritage, and the Philippine Commission on Higher Education required that students be taught Philippine literature. Here's the timeline for the contemporary period of Philippine literature. First, the birth of freedom. It happened in 1946 to 1970. In 1946, the United States formally acknowledged the Republic of the Philippines' independence. The Philippines regained its freedom, and the Barangay Writers Organization was established with the goal of publishing Filipino works in English. During this time, Philippine literature was reborn. The majority of the writings concerned with Japanese atrocities. The period of activism. It happened in 1970 to 1972. In 1972, martial law was declared as a result of activism. According to Ponciano Pineda, youth activism in this period was motivated by both internal and international issues. The period of the New Society. It happened in 1972 to 1980. In this period, most themes in most publications are related to the country's development or progress, such as the Green Revolution, family planning, appropriate nutrition, the environment, drug addiction, and pollution. Most poems' themes revolve around patience, respect for native culture, customs, and the beauty of nature and surroundings. Newspapers took on new formats during this time. Economic success, discipline, culture, tourism, and other such stories were preferred over the news of murders, rapes, and robberies. The period of the Third Republic. It happened in 1981 to 1985. In January 2, 1981, martial law was finally lifted after 10 years of military governance. This period's poetry is romantic and revolutionary. Writers were outspoken in their criticism of the administration. Many Filipino songs in this period related to real-life issues such as sorrow, poverty, hopes for freedom, and love of God, country, and countrymen.
Some of the prominent Filipino writers in the contemporary period, among these are the novelist Edelberto Nidet Tempo. Edelberto Caindong Timpo was a Filipino writer and professor. He was department chair 1950 to 1969, graduate school dean, vice president for academic affairs, and writer-in-resident. Tempo was also a part-time professor at Estipal University Dumaguete, teaching fine arts, drama, and graduate school. Francisco Arcelana, National Artist for Literature 1990. Francisco Arcelana was a writer, poet, essayist, critic, journalist, and teacher. Is one of the most important progenitors of the modern Filipino short story in English. Ricaredo Dimitelio was a Filipino essayist, poet, and playwright. Dimitelio was one of the most important and prolific literary figures in the Philippines during the 20th century and has won numerous awards for his writing. Amador T. de Gio was a poet, novelist, and teacher during the pre-war. He was best known for his fiction and poems. He was the chief editor for the Philippine House of Representatives as well as several other government offices. Carlos Angeles, a famous Filipino poet with great contribution to Philippines literature. He did not return to school after World War II, but he led an impressive career as chief of the Philippine Bureau of International News Service from 1950 to 1958. Guest of the U.S. State Department on a Smith-Montlater grant, press assistant under the Garcia administration, and public relations manager of Panam Airlines from 1958 to 1980. He also served on the board of directors of International PEN Philippine Chapter. Nestor Vicente Madali Gonzalez was a Filipino novelist, short story writer, essayist, and poet, conferred as the National Artist of the Philippines for Literature in 1997. In 1987, N.B.M. Gonzalez was awarded the degree of Doctor of Human Letters by the University of the Philippines for his creative genius in shaping the Philippine short story and novel and making a new clearing within the English idiom and tradition. Benvenuto Santos was a Filipino-American fiction, poetry, and non-fiction writer. He was also a professor of creative writing and distinguished writer-in-residence at the Wichita State University from 1973 to 1982. During World War II, he served with the Philippine government in exile Washington, D.C., together with the playwright Severino Montano and Philippine national artist Jose Garcia Bala.
For the prominent text, we have Cry's Slaughter by Adalberto K. Tiempo. It was first published in the Philippines as Watch in the Night in 1953. The novel was revised in 1957 for publication in the United States. The Cry's Slaughter was in World War II. The novel narrates the story of guerrillas who were unwilling to surrender while awaiting the return of the armed forces of the United States. In addition, the novel features a tale about the girlfriend of a guerrilla lover who chose to disobey the will of her pro-Japanese parent. This story is a fictionalized account of guerrilla life in the Central Philippines during the Second World War. Cry's Slaughter was based on an actual situations, including the central situation of the shooting of the four envoys by the minister in the story. The original manuscript of the Cry's Slaughter was taken out of the Philippines in a submarine in 1943 under cover of a Philippine blackout. Perhaps it was the only manuscript to successfully leave the Philippines during the war. A Blade of Fern, a novel about the Philippines by Edith L. Tiempo. It talks about a simple Filipino community with all the simple characters in it. A man who escaped from Manila and found himself in a rural mining community, a small family who lives in a taking risk, a group of miners digging day in and day out just so they can support their families. A Blade of Fern is a novel that shows a panoramic view of a rural life and the challenges of survival faced by the miners. The novel is in the tradition of the romantic hero who runs away from the society and rejects to seek the regeneration in a deeply natural environment. The Mats by Francisco Arceliana. It's a short story that depicts a typical Filipino family culture. The story begins with the homecoming of Mr. Angeles, who came from Mariveles. He is the protagonist of the story. He wrote a letter to his family about the great weaving artist that creates mat. He planned to bring some mats to his family from this mat weaver. When Mr. Angeles arrived, the kids were excited to receive their personalized sleeping mats. Mr. Angeles distributed the mats to his children as he calls the names that's on the mat. Now they were all done, but there are 3 mats left. Those mats were for their kids who passed away. The story will taught everyone that no matter how many years had gone, we should never forget our loved ones. It shows in the story that Filipinos are naturally sentimental.
The Wedding Dance by Amador Daggio was first published in 1953. It is a short story about a husband and a wife, Awiyao and Lumnay, who had been married for 7 years but were unable to have children. In spite of being in love with his wife, Awiyao decided to remarry in order to have a son, and he thought that the answer to Lumnay's sorrow would be by joining another woman during the wedding dance. Lumnay was in fact at his wedding but left because she couldn't stand the thought of her husband marrying another woman.
Gabu by Carlos Angeles. It's a poem that reminds the reader to take care and protect our nature. The setting is Gabu itself. The poem describes the event literally from the battering restlessness of the sea to it is the sea pursue a habit of shores. This constant event shows the natural habit of our nature. Value the nature as how you value yourself to maintain it beautiful and to be good example for the next generation. The Bamboo Dancers. The Bamboo Dancers is a historical novel by Filipino novelist N.V.M. Gonzalez, published in 1959. This novel follows the travels of an Americanized Filipino man and his struggle to embrace his own roots in rural culture, praised for its subtlety and careful handling of culture clashes. The Bamboo Dancers is one of the series titled Filipino literary classics. Scent of an Apple by Bienvenido and Santos is a part of a short story collection published in 1978. The Scent of an Apple tells the story of a man and his family's unique experiences in the United States as a Filipino immigrants. It also talks about how first-generation immigrants experience a sense of loss and seeks connection to their past life even if they had created a life for them in the new world. Santos himself is a character in it. Santos wrote Scent of an Apples during the birth of freedom, a period of activism following World War II and the restoration of independence to the Philippines.
So for the fourth part of our presentation, formalist criticism of a text. The setting. The movie begins with the first set of feast and callers welcomed by loud music by the band. They celebrated a fiesta, specifically the Gigantes Festival, which originated in Angono, Rizal. The main character, Yolanda Filipinas, together with its other siblings, Vicky and Eman, were introduced in this part. This frame immediately followed, showing the sophistication and business-bustling city of Los Angeles in the United States of America. The third sibling of the family, Samuel, joined the picture. The third frame that followed shows a war zone in the Philippines between the soldiers and the terrorists. The fourth sibling, Narciso, represents the situation as he is also part of the military. The last frame that followed is a setting in Israel, wherein the last sibling was introduced, Gloria Filipinas. The same with Samuel, she was also working as an OFW. As she stated herself, it's because of the jobs in the Philippines that do not pay enough. At the beginning of the film, these are 4 frames that were shown consecutively with no transition and proper context. Hence, it was the introductory part of the film that introduced the difference between the occupation and differences between the 6 siblings in the latter part of the story. Florencia Filipinas. She is the head of the family Filipinas and a mother of 6 kids. Yolanda Filipinas. She was one of the siblings that decided to settle in the Philippines and not abroad. She became her mother, Florencia's right hand, and in the latter part of the story, she had hidden struggles that were later revealed in the plot. Samuel Filipinas. As the oldest son among his siblings, he had a boastful attitude with a sense of authority. He also works overseas in America together with his 2 children, Lyra and Greg. Samuel had also been a character that stirred feuds among the family. Vicky Filipinas. Among the siblings, Vicky was Florencia's favorite. Just like Yolanda, she decided to settle in the Philippines in preparation for her upcoming wedding to an Indian partner. Gloria Filipinas. The same as Samuel, Gloria works as an OFW, a caregiver in Israel. Among the siblings, Gloria had stayed most gentle and calm in terms of the argument between the family members. Eman Filipinas. Eman is the family's activist. According to Yolanda, Eman is her favorite among the siblings. This might be due to the firm and independent attitude Eman portrays. Despite his family's opposition to his participation in rallies in opposition to the government, Eman was free to do what he wants with his dedication. Lastly, Narciso Filipinas is part of the military and works in the field of war. Among the siblings, he works in one of the most dangerous occupations, which led his story to tragedy near the end of the film. The movie Filipinas revolves around the drama and revelation of an upper-middle-class Filipino family, Filipinas, during the contemporary period. The head of the family, their mother, Florencia Filipinas, has 6 children as mentioned earlier, Yolanda, Samuel, Vicky, Gloria, Eman, and Narciso. The film progresses as it narrates the individual lives of each child and together as a family. It begins with the introduction of the different characters in terms of their occupations and where they currently reside. Two of the siblings, Gloria and Samuel, who both reside outside the Philippines, were given a challenge in their situation abroad that led them into coming back to the country. Samuel, an American immigrant, came back with a hidden reason that he was kicked out from his former job and was struggling financially to provide for his kids. Gloria, on the other hand, faced a bombing incident in Israel that led to the death of her best friend, who is also an OFW worker. As the two came home, the six siblings have been reunited in their home together with their mother, Florencia Filipinas, as well as in preparation for the upcoming wedding of their other sibling, Vicky, who is to be wedded to her Indian partner. Along with the reunion of the whole family, feuds among each sibling have started bringing up their past hidden hate towards another. Yolanda, the mother's right hand, has shared her pain in being upheld by her mother and still not chosen as the favorite one. The tension was then diverted into an emotional grieving of the family, as Narciso, who worked in the military, had tragically passed away as he participates in a war in Basilan. Following the scene that continued, the tension is between the sons, Samuel and Eman, who started the fight due to their pride and unjustly authority of Samuel. It was then followed by another battle between the two during the celebration of New Year's Eve that led to the incident of their mother's comatose and immobility. As the Filipinas family was forced to make a decision over their mother's state, Yolanda had finally spoken out and led the family as the oldest daughter. Here, the siblings have found unity and decided to help each other out for the sake of their mother's condition and as a family. As time passed by, their mother Florencia had eventually gotten better in her state. Although she is immobile, she is still able to live without any form of life support. The siblings, on the other hand, had set different paths in their lives. Yolanda, their mother's right hand, had finally set herself free and stood as the head of their family. Samuel, the American immigrant, still flew back to America to pursue his American dream, but this time he started from a low point. Vicky, the sibling married to her Indian husband, faces struggles of marriage but continues to work it out. Gloria, the OFW from Israel, decided to settle back in the Philippines for good and help Yolanda in taking care of their mother. The government had searched for Eman, the activist, for his opposition to the government. With that, he fled away from his family and together with his fellow activist. From that, the film had ended and the family continued in fulfilling their individual lives. The family Filipinas had ended their family story with the virtues of finding home and profounding strength in family members in times of struggle. At first viewing, it might simply narrate a typical Filipino family in the 90s, but in further interpretation, the Filipinas family represents the types of Filipinos we have in different narratives.
So what are the conflicts that I have seen in Filipinas 2003 movie by Joel Lamangan? First is the individual versus society, in which we can see that activists against the police, or more specifically, Eman, a character from the story, against the government. Next is that individual versus individual, in which we can see in many parts in the movie, which first is that Eman versus Samuel, they had misunderstandings throughout the movie. Second is that Yolanda and Don Zolweta, they also have misunderstandings since there have been a past argument against those two. Next thing is that individual versus self, in which there is no specifically a dialogue, but every one of them is doubting themselves and still finding a way to improve themselves throughout the movie, in which they would contribute to their family. So what are the themes that can be seen throughout the movie Filipinas 2003 by Joel Lamangan? First is that the importance of understanding decisions for the better and repel misunderstandings within the family. Second is that how misunderstandings and not accepting opinions or suggestions lead to more arguments, especially within the household. Third is that respecting one another regardless of position and attainment in life, in which we can see within Samuel and also Yolanda, which is the eldest in the family. Fourth is that even having problems within the country, we shouldn't also forget that we also have problems within our homes.
Next are the distinct lines that are thrown within the film. Malaking epekto kay nanay ang pagtatapat nito ng kanyang kaibigang pari dahil nangyari ito sa panahong humihina ang kanyang pananalig sa katatagan ng aming pamilya at ngayon ay natuklasan niyang ang pader na kanyang sinasandalan ay hindi din pala sintatag ng kanyang inaasahan. The line reiterates the irony of how the people we thought are strong sometimes also carries burden the same way we do. The line narrates that our profession and who we are in society does not invalidate whatever worry we have to carry in honor of our names. Ano man ang kayod nila dito sa ating bansa, wala pa ding mangyayari. It states the low labor fee of most occupations here in the Philippines that pushes some Filipinos to work abroad applying as OFWs. Tiniis niya ang hirap, kagaya ng ibang Pilipino na naniniwala na Amerika ang solusyon sa lahat ng problema. It is embedded mindset for most Filipinos that every single OFW are sleeping in the bed of dollars, but it is not the same for everyone. Hence, we have the American dream mindset that success can be achieved, especially if you have set foot in America. Symbolism. In this scene, Yolanda walks home devastated as she found out the news about her ex-lover getting married. Saddened, she walked through the dark, heavy rain, depicting and creating a mutual symbol of the heartbreak and heavy emotions she is currently experiencing. This scene depicts a Mama Mary and Joseph ornament getting burned after a man threw a fire out of spite. This may depict the building tension and aggression within the family members. It may also mean the cause of feud within the bond of their family ties. Near the end of the film, the grandmother had an injury leading her to being unconscious. It was a total irony as everyone were celebrating a new year for new good beginnings. The Filipinas family had been welcomed by an accident of their mother.
Let us go on to the dialogue analyzation based on my observation. Americans are just smarter than us, wherein they view America as a country to earn money. And not only that, they also view America which has a high economy. Yeah. Moreover, the way they view it is that OFWs who work there have a lot of money, which is also connected to the scene where an individual was given $1 by Samuel. It also depicted in the movie in which that Samuel's opinions are being glorified throughout the movie since he has a high position he earns a lot of money. Kaya nga, he earns a lot of money, which why he is seen like in high position. Next is that, alam kong paborito kami ni nanay lahat, pero di ko maipagkakaila na mayroong favoritism. So this is a contradictory line. Because, alam kong paborito kami lahat ni nanay, sabi niya. Paborito daw sila lahat, pero may favoritism. It's a contradicting line. Also, she views it this way because of how her other siblings get to work without accompanying their mother most of the time. This connects to the scene where Yolanda wanted to have time for herself, but her mom doesn't allow it because she is important to her. So, alam kong paborito kami ni nanay lahat. It's really contradictory in a sense that she's the eldest, but her opinions doesn't matter that much because she has to accompany her mother instead of having to work for her own. Sino ang pinakamatalino? Hindi ba't si Samuel lang? This statement is from Yolanda, which provides the explanation of how her decisions are being ignored even though she's the eldest. As what I have said, Samuel is being glorified because of his high position in the family in which he earns a lot of money, and when in fact he admitted that na bankrupt. I don't know if na-remember ko correctly, pero na-bankrupt daw yung bank, yung ginapagtrabahuan nila. Finally, hindi lang ideal kasi ako yung nagtatrabaho. Aligned by Gloria, which can be perceived as women having the freedom to work for their family. Kasi di ba dati, oh my God, nagtagalog ako. Because before, women, like, hindi sila pwede mag-work because they're women. Ang trabaho ng mga women is dapat dun sa kusina, which is not. And Gloria, which is an OFW, has the opportunity and proved to us in this period, women can work for their family. And with that, I would like to rest my case. Thank you. There are also lines that they categorize with the following metaphor and contradiction. First off, let us have the metaphor. Number 1, bit-bit na mabigat sa balikat ko. Gloria stated this line pertaining to the hardships she have faced in Israel and also there with her family. Pero anong trato sa atin? Di ba parang basahan? This is a line from a character in which he views that their family is being treated like a basahan. Next is that binubuhay marahil siya ng aming pagmamahal, which is a metaphor like line, like you already know what's the meaning. Next is the contradiction. Lagi po tayong magkasama pero di niyo po ako nakikita. As stated in the line that you see me but you don't see me. Now you see me, now you don't. Just kidding. Anyway, next is kahit nakainom ako matino ang isip ko. Not all drunk people, matino yung isip. Let me just give the generalization of what I see in the movie. Filipinas by Joella Mangan depicts the different struggles that can be seen through reality in the Philippines. The family depicted in the movie showed a lot of aspects and lenses through which they unite to conquer the challenges they have faced. As we have seen in the movie, there are a lot of misunderstandings that occurred in the family. In the end, they have reconciled and understood one another. Next is that Yolanda Filipinas introduces her family from her point of view and continues up until the end of the movie. So, she narrates the story one by one, not really one by one, but she narrates throughout the movie to better understand what happens within the movie. Unlike other movies, this doesn't really include a lot of artistic and figurative lines. So it is like straightforward and bold, which really captures the situation overall in the Philippines. Unlike other movies that it really includes like how would you describe a person that she has golden eyes, she has shiny hair, like that. It's not really like that because it's straightforward and it's really serious since it talks about a lot about the Philippines. It also talks about Filipino family culture. Next is that this is what I have observed, that throughout the movie the voice doesn't only include the characters within the frame, but you can also hear the noises, the background noise, the background sounds, and the voices of the characters outside the camera. When I say outside the camera, outside of the frame. So like they're not on the frame, but you can hear their voices, which like it really like you can really like imagine that you are in the movie. You can imagine that you are in the movie. Next thing is that the talk of politics. Yeah, the talk of politics is also mentioned. These are being emphasized throughout the movie. So we can see the activists and also military conflicts, Kodita. We can see in the movie that there are politics. The mention of politics is also included, in which really captures the reality in the Philippines, like based also in one of the reviews I have seen, the setting is based on ex-president Arroyo's what do you call that, regime. So what is the movie by Joel Lamangan, Filipinas, connects relation to the contemporary period. So contemporary period is also known as the rebirth of freedom from 1945 up until to 1960s and so forth. Also, it is known as the recovering era or recovering period of the Philippines. So activists and activism is also present at this era up until today, in which we can see that activists are fighting against the government. Not really fighting against the government, but they are opposed to the ideals or the goals of the government. Also, activists and activism is also present in the martial law era, in which they are silenced by their wrongdoings. Next is the conflicts in military forces, in which we can see that Narciso was killed by a fellow soldier, in which we can also see up until today, just like extrajudicial killings. Next is OFWs that we can see, overseas Filipino workers that work overseas for their family and for money. Next is killings and prejudices. The news about killings and prejudices is also present up until today and to the 1960s, since like killings will never be exempted, and killings will never ever, like, hindi siya matanggal, like hindi talaga siya, like hindi siya matanggal kasi it really happens all the time. Not all the time, pero like mag-happen talaga siya. And rehabilitation of infrastructures, which is the post-war after the Second World War II. And with that, I would like to rest my case.